Oh yeah, I said this night has the unusual convergence of the full moon, the red moon, the blue moon, and the supermoon. It hasn't happened for 150 years. I guess that actually happened this morning, so you're in the clear if you're worried about it. So we are going to download schedule.xlsm and open it up. I think I have downloaded. So we're covering chapter 4 today. It's really kind of take a closer look at developing our own sub-procedures from scratch. We've recorded macros. We've developed sub-procedures by recording macros. But today we're just going to see, what are some of the things involved with just when you write from scratch, what do you have to think about it? So what I have here, the data I have here it's just like class schedule data that I downloaded last semester. So we've got all these different classes. Oh, it's all from the accounting department. This may be all the accounting classes from last semester. Their instructors when they write, and then the days that they're scheduled. What I would like to do is I would like to have VBA give us a visual representation of when these classes run. So right now, if I wanted to see, what were all the classes that start at 11 o'clock, I kind of have to look down through here, or worse yet, what are all the classes that run for more than an hour? To be able to do that, I've got to come in here and compare the starting time to the ending time. That one goes more than an hour. This one, that's more than an hour. But that's the process that I have to go through. I'd like to be able to see this visually. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I want to kind of work in this column over here. I want to just highlight the right cells. I want to change the background color of the right cells to kind of show when this is. So here this goes from 12:30 to 1:45. And so that should be 12:30 starts here to 1:45. That's there. I would like to write a macro that will, or write a subprocedure that will come down here and paint that some color. So I want that one to be painted there. Whatever this next one is, I want it to go in the place where it appears. If there's something like 54 of these classes, I just want that to fill in. And importantly, if I were to add more classes to the schedule or re-import another semester and have it here, I'd like to be able to run that code and have it show the visual representation for that. So that's where we're headed. And we'll explore several different things as we're going about. All right, so are we ready to do it? You understand where we're headed? Oh, we're ready. Oh, you're ready. You're ready for almost 17 minutes. Let's get down to it. First of all, let's spell schedule right here. Schedule. Actually, why don't we call this? Why don't we call make one schedule? We should call it show one schedule. So this procedure is just going to do that for one row. Now the question is, what do I have to work with? So talk to me about an algorithm that I could use to accomplish this. Okay, so here we've got the data, the start time and the end time. And it turns out I've already split out for you here the start and end time into its components. So this is 12:30 p.m., that's 12:30, 13:45, that's 13:45. So this is we put it into 24-hour clocks. The AM and PM is now, that's funny, 13:45 p.m. Anyway, should be 1:45 p.m. But
it's like that.
We're okay. That's kind of a strange time. So, could we split these out with VBA? Yeah, but we haven't talked about the functions that it takes to do that yet. So I've given these to you already split out. But now talk to me about an algorithm. What's the approach? By algorithm, I mean a set of steps that I can use to accomplish this. I've got to look at that starting time, ending time, and I've got to figure out which columns to highlight on the row. How can I do it? What can I do? Get me started. You don't have to tell me the whole thing. Yes?
This is probably not how you're going to tell us to do it. But...
Oh, by the way, before you say it, we are not headed down the road.
Tell us how to do it.
No, we're not headed down the way that I'm going to say, by the way, there's a method that does this. There's some, range dot graphic or something. This is all stuff, we're going to use all stuff that we've already learned in the class. So go ahead.
But in my mind, I would just go through, so there are like 9 times 4, there are like 36 little squares, and I would just move through all of them and on each one iterate and check, like, is this one between the start and paint or don't paint?
So that's a possibility, is for us to loop across here and then be able to ask, does this one belong, is this one in the range? Okay, so that's a good start. Now the question is, how would you tell if it's in the range? That's the thing. Now, humans can do this pretty easily. You know, we just go, it's 10 a.m., 10 a.m. Oh yeah, that's in the range. But how do we get Excel to do it? Any thoughts? Go ahead.
If it's in the range, you give it a certain value based on the variables. You like a case select or something.
Okay, so we might use some kind of case, but I'm still trying to find out, how do we tell if it's in the range? That's the part we got to do. Go ahead.
So like so each column has 4 boxes, and one column is an hour long. So each box is 15 minutes.
Good.
So we can start with 8 p.m. plus 15 minutes until it got to the start point, and then take the difference between the start point and the end point to calculate the minute, and take the total minute divide by 15 minutes to calculate the number of the box.
Total minutes divided by 15, and you're going to find out how many boxes we need. Okay, good. So that's the kind of thinking that we need here. We got to say, all right, how do we get from these minutes to these boxes? And officially now that we've realized, okay, each box represents 15 minutes. I've actually manipulated these numbers on these class start times so that they would actually start on the 15 minutes to make this problem a little simpler than it might otherwise be. But yeah, so we've got something with the minutes, but let's start just with the hour. Let's ask the question, how do we figure out what the starting hour is? Which column that starting hour belongs in? So we'll look at this one. Let's look at this first row. So we've got a 12 there. How can we count? Let's just ask ourselves, what column do we need that to? Where should that start? For 12,
AI.
Yeah, it starts at AI. That's a tip. We're going to need some artificial intelligence here to do that. So here, I could count and find the number of that column because here's 26, 27, 28, 29. Or you just make it the active cell and ask for the column of the active cell. Okay, so 35. I've got to convert a 12 into a 35. There's a comment over here.
Well, I was thinking, just kind of to start off, we can have the hour compared to 8, and so 12 minus 8 is 4. So we need it 4 sections away from the start of the 8 o'clock.
Aha, okay. So we're now saying this schedule starts at 8. And so if I've got 8 o'clock, then I'm starting right here. If I've got 9 o'clock, it's starting here. It's 1 block over or 4 columns over. And what you're saying is hey, this is 12, so I've got to move over 12 minus 8 blocks to get to here. Okay, so that's pretty good. So depending on how we actually implement this, we could use offset as we get there. But I just want to calculate the number. Now, what you also identified is something very interesting, and that is I don't want to think about this as column number S. What is that? What 19. Is S? 19?
Yeah, I just looked it up.
We looked it up. So I don't want to have to think about this as 19. I'd rather think about this as 1. And that's actually a really healthy thing to do, because what would happen if I calculated all this around this being 19, and then the next time we get data in here, we realize, oh, we've got a new column. We've got to add a column. Now, all my numbers are off. But if I could say, there's a start, this thing starts in 19, and I can give that as one value, and then I'll work from that for the rest of my code, then I don't have to change that in one place. So why don't we go ahead and start that? Let's start off. So I think we're getting very close to this. So let's start off just trying to figure out where our start hour is going to be. And so we're going to read in here the start. We're going to read the value for the start hour. We're going to get a first column that we'll use to set as our beginning, and then we'll work from there. So let's come to the code. Let's see if I can show some of this up there still. I don't have a whole lot of room on this screen. Okay. So we'll declare a couple of variables. First one, I'm going to declare a start hour as a byte. Why byte for start hour?
It's never going to get longer than.
Never going to be bigger than 23. It'll be 0 to 23. So it's never going to be negative. So that's a pretty good size to use. It'll be integer values only. Go ahead.
This may be something that you want to put off to later, but why do you always lowercase the first letter but capitalize the?
Oh, so what do I do? Why am I using this approach to capitalization?
Yeah.
This version of making variable names is called camel case, and it's just a convention. The reason that I like it is because later on when I type this variable, I'm going to type it in all lowercase, and if I see the capitalization happen in the middle, I will know it's spelled correctly. So the truth is, I actually favor this one, just because I think it reads better. There's another, when you have multi words in a variable name, separated by a semicolon or by an underscore and put the whole thing in lowercase, I think that looks better, but I will misspell my variable names more often that way because there's no uppercase to happen.
Is that snake case?
Oh, I don't know if it has another. There may be a name for it. I don't know what it is. Does anyone know? Does it have a name? This is called camel case because it kind of looks like a camel. You have kind of bumps in the middle where those capital letters go out. So that's why it's called camel. It's called snake case? Why is it called snake case? Does it say that?
You're adding a snake in
It looks like a snake.
It does not look like a snake.
It's got bumps for words, which is where like a snake meets a mouse, it makes a bump for your.
Ah, there we go.
Hey, it's called what it's called.
All right. Question, yeah.
Could we, I think this work, could we just convert everything to minutes to save us, like, defining hours versus minutes? Just like, start by just multiplying all the hours out to minutes and then just put everything in terms of just one number.
So the question is, could we do this just all as minutes? And the truth is that we could, but we still have to we would still have to back this up into 15. We then have to divide by 15, but yeah, we probably could do that. I'm not sure that the math is going to be any simpler that way. And so since I've worked through this example not doing it that way, I'm not going to do it here in class. But that would be a fine way to do it. Okay, so I'm going to have a start hour. I'm going to need to infer a start column. Let's call it start call. Look at that as an integer because I can have more than 255 columns, even though this example presumably won't have that many. We also declare a couple other things here. Let me dim S as a worksheet, and then we'll be able to bind this particular worksheet so we can refer to it with a single character. And let me also dim R, or dim row, as a long integer. Let's go ahead and give ourselves, start off by figuring out which row we're going to be on. So I'm going to set row equal to the row of the active cell. So at this point, the way that we're just going to do it for one row is that you put yourself on the row you want, run the code, and that's the one we'll do. Active cell.row. Okay, so now I know the active cell. How am I going to read in? Someone help me with the syntax here to be able to read in my start hour. Start hour equals what? Oh, let's bind onto the S worksheet first. S dot set S equal to worksheets. The name of the worksheet we're on is sheet 1. Okay. So start hour equals S dot something. So we're referring to the worksheet. That's the sheet 1 worksheet. And now, how are we going to refer to pull in the start time? Once this runs, start hour has to equal 12. How do I get there?
Use cells.
Cells, that's a good idea. Then what?
Just use row as the variable for the row, and then whatever column.
K is column 11.
And 11.
So we can put 11 here, or we could just put capital K in quotes. And we don't want the address, we want the value. So now we've got the start hour, and we're trying to infer, oh, we need one more thing, and that is our first column. I'll set that up here in the opening block. First column equals 19. So that's column S. So now if we end up, moving where this thing starts, not 19, we just have to change it right here, and then the rest of this math should work just fine. Okay, so our next job is to calculate where our first column is. I'll get us started. It's going to be, I'm sorry, not our first column, our start column. It's going to be our first column plus something. What's it going to be? Start hour minus 8. Start, H-O-U-R, minus 8. Okay, let's think about this. So let's suppose that our start hour is 8 o'clock. Our first column is going to be number 19 right here. Our start hour is going to be 8. We're minusing 8, and so it's going to be plus 0. That is right on the money. That's going to get us to the 8 o'clock start time. Now let's suppose it's 9 o'clock. How does this calculate? Be 19 plus 9 minus 8, which is going to be what? 1. So that's going to put a start hour of 9 o'clock as being right there. So it's good. It's past the 8 o'clock. It's moved forward. It just hasn't moved forward far enough.
When I was thinking of this also, since it's in hours, we could times it by 4, so that way it would go for the correct number.
Yes. When I have 1 hour past 8 o'clock, I've got to advance 4. When I've got 2 hours past 8 o'clock, I've got to advance 8. 12, 14, is that right? 4, 8, 12, 14. And so I am going to take my start hour minus 8 and multiply that by 4. So I'm going to start at 19. If this evaluates to 0, this whole thing will be 0. We'll start there. That's fine. If this evaluates to 1, this whole thing will be 4. And so we'll start from column 19 and move to here. I think that's going to get our start hour in the right place. So now that we've got the start hour figured, we still have to deal with the minutes. But we've got the start hour figured. Let's go ahead and make it so that we can highlight this. So let me go ahead and refer to that cell. So S dot cells, row number, column number, start hour. Oh no, first call. No, start call. Dot. Now, I want to change the color of this cell. Have we changed color of cells before?
No.
If we have, it was a long time ago. Well, it could be too long ago. We're only 7 course periods into the class. So, here's how we do it. It's not a property of the cell itself. It's a property of one of the properties of the cell. So the cell has a property called interior. And that has a property called color. And we'll just set that equal to some number between 1 and 16 million. Pick a number. 5. That's not a very thoughtful number. I mean, 5. It's 16 million to work with. 5 is almost black. So that's okay. We'll do 5. So when we run this, we're hoping that changes that color right there. Yeah, you might think that's black, but 0 is black. That's almost black. Yeah.
So when you set row equal active cell dot row, so what is the active cell in that case?
In this case, my active cell is whatever cell is active in the workbook. So each workbook only ever has 1 active cell at a time. It could have 12 worksheets. One of those worksheets is active, and 1 cell on that worksheet is the active cell. And so this refers to a particular range. The range it refers to depends on which cell is active in the workbook. I am then asking for the value of the row property of that object.
Okay.
And then this is, so right now, the active cell is on row 2, and so this will return a 2. And so my row variable is going to be 2. So down here, when I'm referring to it, I'm going to say I'm changing a cell. What row is it on? It's on row 2. What column is it on? It's on the column that I calculated.
My next question is like, why you have the formula like start column equal first column plus that? Like.
So my start column is the column I'm trying to figure out right now. And so I've got to decide, by looking at this 12 right here, I've got to decide which column over here corresponds to the 12.
Okay.
And so we're saying, well, our calendar starts over here in column 19, so that's our first column. And then we're going to add on to that our 12 minus 8, which is going to, because we don't have the first 8 hours of the day. So we're starting here on this hour, and that's going to get us close, but the hour moves by sets of 4. So we've got 4 columns in an hour, which is why we're multiplying this by 4. So far, so good. Yes?
One more quick review question. Will you remind us when we put set in front of
Yep.
assigning the variable?
Yeah, the question is,
now?
what is a set for? I mean, we've set variables equal to things lots of times without putting the keyword set. Set is used for only one thing, and that is to bind an object variable onto an object. So if I'm just putting a value into a variable, no set, I can put the keyword let if I want, but it's not necessary. That's still valid syntax. That's if I'm putting a primitive value, a single value into memory. Here, I'm not putting this object into that location in memory. I am asking for the reference of this object. Tell me the memory address where this object is located in memory and store that in this variable. And the way I say to do that operation is to put the keyword set in front of it. So it's only used when I've got an object variable and I'm connecting it onto an object. Okay, well, I think now I want to try one that doesn't have it. So here's one with an 8 o'clock start time. I want to run it on that one. That's at the 8 o'clock. That's pretty good. Here's an 11 o'clock start time. I want to run it on that one. That hit my 11 o'clock. I'm feeling pretty comfortable about this. Let's find one in the afternoon. Here's a 14. And so that's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So that's pretty good. All right. So far, so good. Come back up onto this row number 1. Okay, so now I've got down to the hours. I now need to adjust it for the minutes. So let's think through that. Let me go ahead and declare another variable. I'll do it right after I have my start hour, dim start minute, as a byte, as a bullet format too. Start minute. Okay, so I'm reading my start hour here. This is going to be really similar to the start minute. How do I get the start minute? Well, the start minute is just the next column over from the start hour, so instead of K, it'll be L. So my start minute is going to be column. So I've declared my start minute. I've given myself a value for my start minute. Now I have to advance my starting column based on the minute. So I've already gotten myself to the right hour. Now my start call, I need to add something else over here, plus, so that I can get to the right column. So let's think about it. If the start minute is 0, I don't want to add anything. I'm already in the right place. If it's a 15, I have to advance by 1 block. If it's a 30, I have to advance by 2. If it's a 45, I advance by 3. So I've got this vector. I've got 0, 15, 30, 45 that I have to convert into 0, 1, 2, 3. What's the operation that will do that? Divide by 15. So I'm going to add on to this my start minute divided by 15. And if you're like me, you look at this and you go, what is going to happen first? I can't remember order of operations from my high school algebra class. So I'm going to be sure I put parentheses around that, even though division does take precedence over addition. That would be okay. Same thing here. Multiplication is going to happen before addition. If you want to expressly bind those together, that's healthy. So now my start column should be the right column, whether it's the minute or the hour that I'm dealing with. Let's choose a different color because we can see that it happened not black. In fact, why don't we go ahead and declare ourselves a variable for this. Dim color, and a long integer. Color equals, last cast said use 666. That's a good number. And it ends up being kind of a nice color anyway. And so now when I'm finding the color, I'll use that variable. That way I can change it easily enough right here. So I run this. I'm expecting this class that starts at 12:30 now to highlight. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of what I've got here. I'm expected to show that in some different color. And there we go. That's now starting at 12:30. That looks pretty good. If you want to check it on some different lines, you're welcome to do so. Make sure that it hits a 0 right and a 15 or a 45. I'm not sure we have any starting at 45, but we do have some ending at 45. So far, so good. I mean, the code hasn't been terrible. We've been able to kind of think through it, try to think, how am I going to do it, and try to solve the whole problem at once. It's daunting, but if we can get down just to a little part of it and then build off of that, that's helpful. And in fact, in general, that's a healthy way to go about programming this. Sometimes we have beginning students who think, I've got a program I've got to write, and I'm going to write the whole thing out, and hopefully it'll be right, and then I'll test it when I'm done writing the whole thing. I'm not going to run the code until I've written the whole thing out. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Sucks.
That's a really, really bad idea. Because then when you have the error, you've got a whole bunch of code to wonder where the error is. But if you have one line and you execute it and there's an error, guess where it is? It's on that line. That's where it is. And if that one's working and you add one more line and you have an error, where's the error? It's probably on the line you changed. And so you're much better off to say, let me get part of this going and then build a little more and build a little more and build a little more. Okay. How many of you took that approach with the Fibonacci assignment? You tried to write the whole thing out before you ever ran it. Yeah, and it's a reasonable thing to do. It's just hard. Did it work for you the first try? No, yeah, it usually doesn't. For some people, it does. They're like really good at this, and that's not me. Okay. Well, for me, it's not the logic so much as the typing that usually gets me. Okay. In-class exercise. I do actually read your course comments, and one student. Professor Allen, you lecture all the time what I would do for an in-class exercise. Just one, that would be great. Here's your in-class exercise. Calculate where the end column is. It would be really similar to what we have right here. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Start off by making variables that match these three. Start an end minute, an end hour, and an end column, and then calculate these. I will set a timer. 5 minutes. Oops. Stand by. Question. Who asked? Oh, no, just go. Thank you. Should be all the code we've written so far. If you have a question or a problem, raise your hand. We've got a TA here. There's TA and I'm. Questions?
I never do anything as bytes. Is that bad, or are you just are you a good enough programmer that you put things as bytes, and I'm bad enough to do integer, or am I doing something wrong?
Integer is just going to use an extra byte for every variable. So in this program, if you use integer, it's a byte. And a couple of times that we have it, or 4 times that we have it, 4 bytes of memory. On the midterm, I'm going to give you some questions like, what's the best data type to use? Hold on over between 1 and 100. You're going to come up with byte.
Okay.
Well, pick byte from a list. Just come up with that. Byte.
Did you specify that we're not supposed to create new variables for this? Did you specify that we're not supposed to create any new variables?
No, you should duplicate this set that we have here. Start hour, start minute, start column.
Gotcha, yeah.
But make them for n. Do what you want. Right. Oh, 5-minute mark.
Does anybody else have a problem that you can't scroll within the VBA editor? You ever scroll with your trackpad?
It is a known problem.
Is there anything to do about it?
You have to get a different computer.
You're kidding.
No,
It's just a driver?
Microsoft's aware of the problem, and they're like,
Forget Kevin, he's not important.
Yeah. In fact, I bought a new computer at the beginning of last semester. And I started doing VBA, and it's like, oh, he won't scroll. Well, we'll find out what's wrong with that. Yeah, I found out. You can't fix it. Return the computer report because it's still returnable. So, maybe too late for you.
It's hard.
Okay. All right. How many of you were able to do that in that 5 minutes? Oh, good number. How many of you are going, I think I'm on the right path, and I could do this probably before midnight tonight. I think I'd be able to get to it. A few of you there? And how many are going, it doesn't matter how long, I'm not getting there today? Okay. Probably should have paused the video for that 5 minutes. Sorry, video watchers. Fast forward somewhere in there, I guess. All right, let me just go ahead and go through it. So I think I'm just going to give myself a little bit of room in here so I can kind of see that as a block. And I'll recreate this as end, oops, and hour and column. I'm not sure where this goes. And so I've got here where I'm defining what my start hour or my start minute is. I'm going to take this whole block, move this whole block here. Copy it. Maybe I'll just do a find and replace for start and end in this one. That'll get me pretty close. For start, change it to end. Replace all this like text. So my end hour is not going to be K, it's going to be N. And my end minute will be N. Let's see, my end column is going to be the first column, plus my end hour minus 8. I think that's all pretty good. I think I might have to make one more modification here. We'll see it in a minute. And then I'm going to set my cells, my end column, with that same color. That's pretty good.
Are you gonna take that last line out?
Should be the start column.
So I've got my start column here. That's going to paint my start column the way it used to. This one's going to paint my end column. It's not going to get everything between, but this is going to get my starting and my ending. I don't need to take this one out. But maybe I've missed something. Maybe I'm not quite thinking clearly about this, which would not be that unusual. Let's run it and see what it does. Let me change this to some kind of green so I can be sure that we're doing that. And we've got some predefined constants. I can do VB green. In fact, you know, it's just a... Did we talk about predefined constants? A variable is just a name for a location in memory with there's some value at that location in memory. Same thing a constant is. When the Excel environment opens up, it dumps hundreds and hundreds of variables into memory, constants into memory, so I can refer to them by their name. One of them is VB green. It's 62,280. It's one of those 16 million colors. It's like fluorescent lime green. It's delightful. Okay, but now I'm hoping I'm on here, so this should give me 1230 and then end somewhere. So let's run it. So that gives me, starting at 1230, now when does this class end? This class ends at 1345. Oh! But the start algorithm is saying that line between the columns is where it starts, and so it's going into that one. But I'm figuring out that same line, but I'm not assuming that I'm going after it. I now have to end before it. And so I think I just have to subtract 1 off of whatever I've calculated for my end column. So here's my end column. I'm just going to, after this wonderful stuff, I'm just going to subtract 1 off of it. And let me go ahead and clear these off. And run it again. Oh, whoops, I was down here. I didn't act this up. Let's see if this one did it right. So this starts at 2 o'clock and ends at 3:15. Starts at 2, ends at 3:15. Yeah, so the fact that my ending has to barely butt up to the line that it ends at, and my starting has to start from that one and move on, I've got to make that adjustment. Okay, so far so good. Now, let me go ahead and I'm going to bring both of these coloring lines down together. We're going to do something a little more sophisticated with the coloring, but now at least I've got my kind of my 2 blocks here to figure out where it starts, figure out where it ends. By the time I'm done here, I know the column where this color has to start, the column where it needs to end. And now I've got to do something to color those. At this point, I'm just coloring the starting and the end column. I want to do everything in between. There are several approaches that I can take to do this. Let's use the one that we learned just last time to reinforce some loops. What loop makes sense for me to use in this? If I was going to do a loop to do this, what's the right loop? What's the loop that's just wired for this? For loop, yeah, because I've got to color every cell between where my starting column is and where my ending column. I've got to move by 1 from this number all the way up to this next number. So I'm going to make another variable to control my loop. I'm just going to call it call for column. And call as long, as integer. I'm using it for columns. Columns go up to like 16,000, so integer will be fine. So I've declared my column variable, and now I'm going to make the loop. For call equals what? Where does it start? My start column to what? When? My end column next. And now Now I just need to say I want to change the color, not of my start column, but of my column. First time through the loop, call will be the start column, then it'll be the next one, and the next one, and the next one. It will finally be the end column, and that should now do that whole set of columns in between. So now whichever one I'm on, it should put in the full length of that class. It's a long class. I'm not taking that class. Intermediate financial accounting.
That's terrible.
Who's in it right now? Anyone? Who took it last semester? No?
I think that's junior core.
Is that part of, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah,
That's part of the junior core. The whole junior core is miserable. I went to the junior core. I thought it was actually kind of neat. Okay. So far, so good. Questions? Now, you know what? For these small ranges, coloring each cell at a time, probably not such a big deal. But I can imagine having ranges that are really wide. Maybe hundreds of columns wide that I need to color in a certain way. I would be much happier if I could just have one statement that says, refer to this whole range, and then color that range with one statement. So this approach where we're doing the loop, kind of fun, but really not the best way to go about it. Okay, so let's come here onto 2. And what are we, 35? 35, 36, it's supposed to be 37 through 41? I'm not sure. Anyway, we'll do that. So there's one approach to be able to refer to a multi-cell range. So we could just say range. Most of the time when we refer to a range, we refer to a single cell range, but you can do a multi-cell range here. So we can go from, what is it, AK to AO. So we can go from AK2 to AO2. That should refer to that particular range, and we want to change the interior color of that. Go ahead and run that. And whoops. I didn't want a 1, I wanted a 2 there. 1. So we've got this. I'm actually looking for, I'm surprised it didn't show AK. Let's try that again. Let me go ahead and clear off these paintings I have so far. And we'll try that again. Didn't want to change that to a 2. All right, that's where we're at. So one approach to referring to this whole range would be to say, figure out how, oh how, am I going to build a string that looks like this? And the truth is, if I'm only working in the first 26 columns, so my column letters are A through Z, not a big deal. But as soon as I have to get to AA and try to convert a column number into that column letter, now that I say that, there might be a way to do that. There might be a built-in way to do that automatically. I don't know what it is. So that's one approach. Let's look at another approach that we could do with this range object. And that is right here. Instead of doing this as one argument, the range allows us to have 2 arguments. So I can give it a starting cell and an ending cell, just like the normal string representation of a particular cell. This is going to get us close. We still have the problem with the AK and the AO, but this is getting us in the right direction. You just change this to a different color. We'll go back to 666 here and run that. And we can see that that has done the same thing. Okay, so now here's the trick. This does not have to be a string. It could actually be the reference to a cell. If I look at this right here, right up to there, that is a reference to a cell. That talks about a particular cell. And then from here, we go from that cell. We want to do something with the interior and the color of the interior, of that cell. So I'm going to take that, and I'm going to replace this first argument with that expression. Not call, but my start call. And we're going to change this one to my ending, talking about a particular cell on the row that I'm interested in, and my ending column. That is a really ugly line. Let me highlight one of these arguments to kind of help it read a little bit better. Let's highlight this one. So my range takes two arguments separated by the comma. First one is a cell. Second one is a cell. Not a string for a cell. It's the cell itself. And why don't we change our color to VB blue. We'll run this again. And now, my active cell was down here. Very good. Let's come back to my first row that we know where it goes. And we've now adjusted that with blue. So we don't need a loop to do this. If we can just figure out the starting and the ending, then we're in good shape. Question here.
So when we were using the references, the explicit references, mine was still only filling in those two endpoints. It wasn't doing the whole range. Any idea why?
So when you were here, you were putting something in here, comma, something else in here.
Yeah, we're doing the AK2 to the AO2.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't filling in the range. It was filling in the beginning and end.
Yeah, I know exactly what the problem is. User error. We'll have Super TA, raise your hand and TA will come and give you a hand. He's on his way. And if he can't solve it, we're stuck. We'll have to dismiss class early. Okay. So I think at this point, we've got the ability to do one of these just fine. So now what I'd like to see is how do we make this happen for all of them? And to do this, we're going to do a little different than we've done before. I know since the beginning of the semester you have looked longingly at these two parentheses, and you've wondered, what could those possibly be for? We haven't done anything with them yet. Well, today's your lucky day. It turns out, well, here, let's do this. Let me first make another sub procedure. I'm going to call this one show full schedule. And I'm going to call show one schedule from this. So these two now do exactly the same thing. One just calls the other. But now let's see what we can do with those parentheses. I'm going to take my row, my declaration for my row right here, and like magic, I'm going to drag it. I'm just going to click and drag and put it right between those parentheses. I've moved it up here. That's what those parentheses are for. They allow me to declare a variable inside the parentheses. Now, it turns out that the only thing I can do inside these parentheses is declare a variable, which means the keyword dim is not needed. Not only is it not needed, it's not allowed. And so I've got to get rid of the keyword dim here, but the rest of this is just as a dim statement. I declared a variable inside. Why would I do it here? I do it here because it behaves just a little bit differently when I declare it here. I am parameterizing this subprocedure. I am saying when you call this subprocedure, I want to send the value into a variable. I don't want the row variable to be defined by the active cell anymore. I'm just going to comment this line out. No. I'm not going to read the row off the active cell. I am going to expect the caller of this procedure to tell me which row. And so if I want to do row 3, I'll put a 3 right there. And when I call show one schedule and pass it a 3, then that 3 gets assigned into the value of this variable. I am saying call the show one schedule subprocedure and assign 3 into the parameter that it has right here. So now when I run this, make sure I don't already have 3 yet. Row 3 is not done yet. I'm going to run this, and regardless of where my active cell is, it should put it for number 3. By the way, I'm not limited to only 1. I'll put a comma in here, and I'll drag my definition of my color up there. So now I'm sending in 2. I'll get rid of my dim. I'll get rid of where I'm setting the color. And now I'm going to pass in the row, and I'm going to pass the color. We'll do row 4 in that color. And now we've done row 4 with a different color. The truth is now I can very easily kind of loop through here and say, well, I'm going to do my Tuesday, Thursday classes in one color and my Monday, Wednesday classes in a different color. And it's just a matter of which parameter I send down to the subprocedure. So this is neat. These are variables. They're a special kind of variable called a parameter. But they're variables in every other sense. It's a named location in memory where I can store a value and read it back. The syntax I use for it is just the same. What makes it special is that I can give it a value when I call the procedure where the parameter is declared. Question?
So are you not allowed to give it a value like when you delete
So the question is, could I give it a value right here? Or you're saying in the dim?
Oh, I was saying the dim, but I guess
You cannot put the value, in VBA you cannot assign a value on the dim statement. So the dim is only to allocate the memory.
Like how you deleted some down there, like the color and stuff. If you had left that, which one would it have followed? Do you get my question?
I don't understand the question. If I had...
Because you deleted where it says color equals
right.
baby blue or something like that.
Oh, if I had left it in here?
If you had left it, would it have like not worked, or would it? Which one would have picked?
Okay, so let's say I still have my row equals active cell dot row. So I will have put 4 into this location in memory. We'll come right down along here, and now remember it's just a variable. It's going to write right over the top of what's in that variable with the new value. So yeah, you can change the values once you get here. Warning, depending on what I pass to this, it might have some unexpected consequences elsewhere in the code. Specifically, if I pass if this is a variable, not a constant, and then I change it down here, it'll actually change it in the source variable as well. That's a more complex treatment than I want to give to it today. Is that a question or a scratch?
Scratch.
Okay. So now what I'd like to do is I would like to see what are my options to be able to make this now go for all of my rows. So let's go ahead and do a for loop. Let me declare a couple of variables here. Let me dim R as a long, and let me dim last row as long. Let me go ahead and set up last row to start. Last row is 55. I happen to know that's the last row the data are on. Now we'll do a for loop. For R equals 2 to 55 to last row. Next. What do I have to change now so this will actually change more than row number 4? What do I put instead of the 4? R. All right, the first time through this loop, R is going to be 2. Next time through, it's going to be 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way to 55. And so that should do the whole schedule. And it shouldn't take that long. It should take half a second or less. I don't have any reason to think I've put myself into an endless loop. Although I'm wishing I had put do events somewhere in my code. Okay, so I was in an endless loop. I had to kill Excel and recreate some of my code. I'm saving now before I run this. Oh, should give it a name. That's a good idea. I'm going to put it in my documents. And I'm going to call it schedule _winter of 18. All right, so I'll run that. Argument not optional. Oh, I need to put in row and some color. And I've got to get rid of my declaration of color down here. There we go. Okay, so now that's built in the whole schedule. So that's what we want to look like. Now the trick, and the next thing that I want to see is how, oh how, can I calculate what the last row is supposed to be instead of having it hard-coded here? I want to look at the worksheet and ask, what's the last row? How can I do it? If I was just doing Excel, how would I find the end of this data? Control down arrow. That would do it. Now, way back before the control key was invented, there was a 2-keystroke sequence. Control key was one of the great inventions of our modern era. Watch this. One finger at a time. I'm up here in A1. I'm going to tap the end key, end, and then tap the down arrow key. So 2-stroke sequence and down arrow does the same thing that you know is control down arrow. And up arrow does like control up arrow. It's not hold the end down and hit the arrow. It's tap it and then tap the other one. I tell you that because the code we're about to see is now going to make a little more sense. Instead of last row equaling 55, I'm going to set it equal to sheets, the sheet name, sheet 1, dot range A1, dot end. There's a method called end. There's a constant called XL down. It's not in quotes, it's a numeric constant. It's like negative 4,112 or something. This, you're okay with this part referring to a cell, right? You get that. On this sheet, there's a range called A1. That has a method called end. End returns a reference to a cell as well. And so this refers to a cell. It doesn't select the cell, it just refers to it. So what cell does that expression refer to? Range A, 55. Cell A55. And so I want to ask, I don't want to set last row equal to the value that's in that cell or to the address. I want the row of that cell. And so now this will do the whole code. Let's change this back to blue. And run this, and that has redone all of our code now in blue. Let me show one more variation of this, and this would be a problem if, let's suppose I had something missing. I'm missing some data here. Now, what does end down select? End down takes me right to there. And so that going down only works if I've got contiguous data. But what if I've got holes in the data, but I still want to get all the data? Here's a trick. Instead, I'll leave this one here because it's a common way to do it. But instead of using range, let me use a particular cell. So cells, row number 1,000,000, column number 1. And instead of going down, I will go up. Now, instead of using, that will work as well, because now that will start at the very bottom of the worksheet. It will do end up until it hits data. It will refer to the same cell as if I was going down. But instead of telling it how many rows there are, I'm going to ask it to figure it out itself. Rows.count. So rows.count is going to give me how many rows there are. Here's rows.count. So that's going to plug that value in there. And so we'll start at the very bottom of the worksheet. We'll come up till we hit data. Now, let's go ahead and change this one back to red. Now, when I run that, even though I had the break here, it's going to have painted all of the data. So this top one says go down based on contiguous data. This one says start at the bottom and come up until you hit any data. And that's where it will stop. Questions? Question here.
What's the difference between sheets and worksheets?
Louder. Difference between?
Sheets and worksheets.
Oh, what's the difference between sheets and worksheets? And the answer is sheets is all sheets, whether they're worksheets or chart sheets. Since I don't have any chart sheets here, worksheets and sheets is going to do the same thing. If I have chart sheets, then those come into the mix as well. Question?
So when you set the R and the 66 in the bracket, and you set in the in sub, do you have to delete it when you go? Do you have to delete it when you set it?
So yeah, so because I've declared these variables here and I'm passing their values in, I've got to get rid of their declarations in here, and I've got to not be assigning their value down here.
So all of them, right?
Okay.
So what about? Because I remember you when you for the R1, then you set R equal acceleration row. You have to undo it.
Yeah, I had to get rid of that. That's actually what put me into the endless loop, was having this change in here. All right, folks, I'll post this video. Feel free to go look back and watch it multiple times. No extra charge. And thanks for coming. Class dismissed. MBAs, we have a habit of that.
It's hard. It's a hard one to break. Yeah.
Don't break it. I like it.
Well, it feels awkward too. I think it was the second class, and whenever I started slotting it.
Yeah, be brave. Just start clapping. If no one else claps, clap louder. Also.